And the phone, him leaving the phone, is that a function of him just forgetting in the moment? I get why you wouldn't take a phone with you into the water, even if you're bouncing from boat to boat. I get it. I know that kids don't want to leave their phones, but I'm on a boat all the time. All right, I got water behind me. You know, we're water babies where I live. Kids don't bring their phones into the water. It's a mistake.
In this situation, this is much more so, and the reason is I think people are not being able to put together visually what it looks like out there. You have your phone and stuff on a boat. You're next to the boat. You're not like necessarily floating off somewhere way away from the boats. It's tons of boats. So what you do is you hang out in the water, you drink, you're talking or whatever, and then when you want to do something with your phone, you just go to the boat, which is sometimes within arm distance or sometimes within several feet, and you get on the boat and do your Snapchat or whatever you got to do, and then you leave it on the boat because you're in water to your chest. People are not going to be holding their phone like this. And then the reception out there is kind of spotty. So it's not like they got Wi-Fi out there and everybody can just upload stuff. So a lot of people are not really interested in their phones. They've gotten away.
A young man vanishes from a sandbar party. Hundreds of people are there. Boats, music, alcohol. His body washes up days later on Horn Island. The family attorney steps before cameras and frames a narrative. But a former detective has now sat with the young men last seen with the victim, and what he found dismantles the public story piece by piece. Picture a cell phone resting on the fiberglass seat of a boat, waves lapping against the hull inches away, still logged into an account that shows no sign of tampering. That phone was never hidden. It was simply left where everyone leaves their phone when they go into chest-deep water. The accusation that it was wiped falls apart the moment you understand the geography.
From the mainland.
So the phone on the boat was never going to be a dispositive fact. It seemed like that early on, but we were thinking land-based, not water-based. Then what did you pick up of? What's your best sense at this point, preliminary as it is, of, so they say, all right, you want to stay with the girl. How does Katie help? You were saying that it's not clear when she disengaged. Is there anything that you now know about what happened once they leave?
Tony Bruv examined the timeline directly with the witnesses. The phone was left on the boat because they were on the water, not on land. It was a mistake to treat that as a dispositive fact without understanding the environment. Yet that single technical misunderstanding powered a media cycle. Then the questions turned to who remained with the victim after the main group departed.
Yeah, it's nothing. It's still a big gap because a lot of his friends that knew him that we're communicating with, they were gone. And the only person left behind that we know of that can attest to any of this is that girl, Katie. And I saw some of her text messages, but we reached out to them to try to see if she can put some more context because everybody's saying that he was hugged up with Katie. Like literally, Warren said she was cradled in his arms. Like, you know, he's feeling her. They feeling each other. So at what point do they separate? And at what time? Because the boys left around 4:30. Trayston left before the boys left because he got into a fight and his uncle made him leave and they got on a boat and left.
A significant gap opens. The majority of the group, including those now publicly accused, left the island around 4:30. Another individual departed even earlier after a separate fight. The only confirmed person still with Nolan Wells was a young woman named Katie. She may be the last person to see him alive. Brew has seen some of her text messages, but she has not yet provided the full context to rule herself out of that timeline.
And so all of this is going on. A lot of the boys that were with him had already left. Then the question is, who saw Nolan after this? How late was Nolan at the island from somebody's visual? And the fact that Katie, and I'm not saying she did anything wrong. I just have not had a chance to talk to her and get her context enough to rule out the fact that she may have been the last person to see him alive.
Did she talk to the cops?
I'm not sure, but I think she did.
They say they have 60 interviews.
Yes. So with that being said, I think that everybody
60 interviews. There's nobody not to.
What occurs inside that gap remains unaccounted for. The investigation includes 60 interviews, yet the public framing has already fixed blame on those who were no longer present. Bro acknowledges the family's attorney is correct on one narrow point: someone knows something. But the alternative scenarios are being ignored. He could have wandered. He could have drowned. That island has an area locals call the washing machine, a convergence of current and tide that has claimed lives before.
Agitate you about Ben Crump, but he is right, and so is the family, that somebody knows something, right? Because unless Nolan said, I'm not coming with you, I'm going to go to the island and run the length of the island, which is like 10, 12 miles long. Unless he said something like that, he was with other people when they left.
There's a great possibility that he was, and there's also a possibility that he could have wandered off and drowned, because the way they described it, and people have drowned there often. Like, I think they said like 3 or 4 people per year drown right there at Horn Island. And it's because of the tide. And it's a weird little situation on the west side of the island where they were at. And they were showing it to me, and it get rough. And there's an undercurrent.
They call it the washing machine.
Right. That's what they said, a washing machine. And so it don't matter how good of a swimmer you are, you get caught in the middle of that, you can drown. And when you're in an environment where there's hundreds of people out, there's music blaring, people are drunk, it's a possibility. I'm not saying this is the more likely possibility that I believe happened, but he could have wandered off to go pee, because they were saying that when you pee, you don't want to pee in front of everybody, so you kind of wander off. And there's a drop off. If you get caught in there and you go under, or you pass out because you're drunk, everybody's distracted, you can...
A young man intoxicated, needing to relieve himself, steps away from the crowd toward a drop-off. In that environment, with hundreds of people distracted, music blaring, a disappearance can happen in complete silence. Brew does not say this is the most likely explanation. He says it is a possibility that requires the same scrutiny as any criminal theory. The evidence has not spoken yet. The evidence was never asked.
Be gone like this and nobody ever know. But it does seem suspicious to me that nobody saw him. Now, with hundreds of people there. But here's another thing that I think, which is the problem why I think Benjamin Crump and them should have never been involved in this. Because now I'm getting the sense that people are afraid to come out and say anything, because even if you saw Nolan, but you had nothing to do with it, you don't want to tell nobody publicly. You'll tell the police, but you don't want to tell anybody publicly, because you will be masqueraded as the white person who killed Nolan Wells. And just like these boys are experiencing, even though they have an alibi that they weren't there when whatever happened to them happened. So I think that the community and people that are out there are scared. Now, they may have told them.
Well, there's got to be some other black folks and some Latino folks. It wasn't all white people who were there.
Then the analysis turns structural. Brew identifies a secondary consequence of the attorney's involvement. Witnesses who saw Nolan but had no role in his death are now terrified to come forward publicly. They will speak to law enforcement in private, but to attach their name to this case publicly is to invite being branded the white person who killed Nolan Wells. The mechanism is self-reinforcing. The louder the racial narrative becomes, the more witnesses retreat. The fewer public witnesses, the easier the narrative is to sustain.
100%. And this is the thing. This is another thing, Chris, why I'm like, well, why would they jump to the race thing? Why don't they ask the black kids what happened to him? I mean, he was out there with all kind of friend groups. So why is the black kids okay with not knowing what Nolan did? And they left him too. If somehow they have no recollection.
Because it's Mississippi. That's why.
But
that's why.
Mississippi.
That's the cultural precept that blacks have been systemically discriminated against in that state egregiously, and that's why.
But here's the caveat to that. I agree. I know that has happened. That has happened all over the nation. But black people have also been the contributing factors of murdering other black people too, more recent in history. So, but this is why people can't prejudge things without the evidence. Because what is the more likely thing that will happen to you? More than likely, you'll get.
The investigator asks a question the public framing cannot accommodate. Nolan was at that gathering with multiple friend groups, including black and Latino attendees. Why is the inquiry not directed toward them with equal force? Why does the narrative default to a white suspect when the demographic composition of the party was mixed and when statistical patterns for intra-group violence are well documented? The question hangs there, unanswered.
Killed by somebody that looked like you. More than likely, the beef and the conflict will be with another black person versus white people in most cities, period. However, we know the historical context, but you can't produce that forever. You can't say forever and a day, because I'm in Mississippi, if a white person do anything, it's got to be a racial undertone. I don't think it's fair, because then what happens? There may be an actual suspect that's not black. I mean, that's not white, that they're not looking at, because they're saying it must be a racial thing. And it could be a conflict thing. It could be a drug thing. It could be somebody getting too drunk and Nolan passing out or falling off the boat, and now people are scared to say anything because they feel responsible. But
Brew does not deny Mississippi's history of systemic discrimination. He acknowledges it directly. but he argues that a perpetual default to racial undertone becomes an investigative liability. A suspect who does not fit the narrative may be overlooked. The conflict could have been personal, drug-related, or a drunken accident that someone is afraid to report, presuming the motive before the facts locks the inquiry into a corridor it may need to exit. The evidence was never asked.
One thing that I think people should realize is that it must have happened near Horn Island, because the authorities are saying because his body washed up on Horn Island and the way the current works, it must have happened somewhere in the area, like right in the area. It couldn't have happened offshore too far because he wouldn't have washed up on land. So, but I just wish that people would slow down and let the investigation do its thing. And here's another thing, Chris, about the deletion of the phone. You know, I don't think that the family and Benjamin Crump are being honest about this. One thing people need to know is there's no such thing as deleting stuff out of the phone, because police can forensically extract anything from your phone. It never gets deleted. It just gets overwritten on the phone to you. Forensic extraction will extract the core of everything that has ever existed on your phone. So if that was the case, the authorities will find that out, and they
Forensic reality further undermines the deleted phone theory. Law enforcement can extract the core of every file that has ever existed on a device. Deletion is a user interface illusion. The data persists until overwritten. If tampering occurred, the authorities will find it. The boys Brove interviewed describe a far simpler chain of custody. 5 phones were left on the boat. The group gathered them, placed them in a car, and returned them to parents who came to collect them. Nolan's mother did not come. Another parent, the mother of a different child, picked up Nolan's phone along with her own son's device.
will be transparent. However, the boys are telling me we had 5 other people's phones on the boat that didn't leave with us. We took the phones, we put it in one of the cars. People came to get their phones afterwards because they came in on other boats. Nolan's mom did not come get his phone. One of the other black kids' mom came and got the other kid's phone and Nolan's phone at the same time. And they said that they just got the phone from the car, gave it right to her, no incident. And they also mentioned, and they could be not telling the truth. Right now, I have no reason to believe that they lied unless I get some other evidence. But they said, we don't know Nolan's password. How would we get in his phone and delete anything? And they're claiming to be his best friends. So that matches to me. And so
The phone was handed directly to her, no incident. And the young men raise a practical objection that needs an answer. They claim they did not know Nolan's password. How would they access the device to delete anything? The family initially stated that missing Snapchats proved deletion, but a forensic evaluation has not yet confirmed that claim. Absence of activity is not evidence of erasure. It is evidence of absence.
one thing that the parents is not saying, because they originally came out and said, well, he don't have any Snapchats, so it must have been deleted. Well, that's not true. Just because he didn't use his phone often doesn't mean that something was deleted. They should have a forensic evaluation first before they say the boys deleted anything. And so right now, all the information I have is that it doesn't make sense for them to delete anything. They can't get through his phone if it had a password, potentially. And there's no real evidence of them deleting anything. Like they're not descriptive of what material was deleted.
The gap between the public accusation and the witness account widens. The material allegedly deleted has never been described with specificity. What file, what message, what timestamp? No answer has been provided. Brew then describes his attempts to bridge that gap directly with the family's attorney.
And I reached out to Benjamin Crump, and they avoided us the first 4 times we emailed them. And then the last time we emailed them, they go, well, we appreciate your interest in talking to Benjamin Crump, but the family is not talking to anybody right now, and they're grieving or whatever the case may be. And it's like, no, I didn't ask to talk to the family. I want to talk to Benjamin Crump, because I would like to know what information does Benjamin Crump have, and how can I facilitate the two to talk to each other? Because these boys are saying something totally different than what Benjamin Crump is saying. Let's facilitate. Let's get
4 emails to Benjamin Crump's office went unanswered. The 5th received a response the family is grieving and not speaking to anyone. But Brud did not request the family. He requested Crump himself. He wanted to sit in the same room, present the counter, narrative from the accused young men, and allow Crump to deliver a balanced perspective to the public. The offer was not accepted.
all in the same room. Let's get Benjamin Crump to talk to their lawyers and tell their side of the story. So when he goes to the public, he can give a balanced perspective. But you know what, Chris? Benjamin Crump don't want to do that, because he's not going to accept anything other than a racial undertone, because in my opinion, if you look at historical data points for him, it's about making money on this. It's not about criminal justice. Benjamin
The refusal is interpreted through a specific lens. Crump in Bruh's assessment will not accept any version of events that lacks a racial undertone. The historical pattern, he argues, points toward financial incentive over criminal justice, wrongful death suits, media saturation, settlement payouts. These are the measurable outcomes. What Bruh says cannot be named is a single instance where Crump's involvement produced a criminal conviction.
Crump rarely gets justice for people criminally. It's all payout, wrongful death suits, and pushing into the media so they can make a lot of money. No one gets criminal justice because of Benjamin Crump. You cannot name one.
Well, he's not
rarely
a prosecutor, and he's not doing criminal defense work in a trial. So, I mean, I get your point, but the counter is, but there is a need for advocacy for Black people to get the legitimacy of transparency and due process, especially in the kinds of situations he inserts himself, where most often, in my experience, if he's around, it usually involves police and use or abuse of force.
A counterpoint enters the discussion. Crump is not a prosecutor. His role is advocacy, ensuring transparency and due process for Black families in cases involving police use of force. There is a legitimate function there, one born from a history of institutional failure. The host offers this as a necessary check on the argument.
Force or excessive force, and then there is a need for advocacy and agency, and that's where he is.
Yeah, see, but I think that it's a grift, to be quite honest. I think that everybody needs advocacy. It's not just Black people. Because if you look at the statistical data points, white people get shot twice as much as Black people unarmed in this country. And they get shot way more than Black people do by police in general. Now, I know that there's more people, but when you look at the crime disproportionality, white people should not be getting shot more than Black people at the disproportionate crime committal and arrest and all of the above. So when you put those factors together, technically the white people getting shot is disproportionate to police activity in white communities. But what I'm saying is that everybody needs advocacy, because I've seen white people get shot for no reason by police and in the most egregious ways. And there is no protest, no activism.
Bruh accepts the premise but widens the aperture. Advocacy should not be racially gated. He cites statistical data on police shootings of unarmed white individuals, which occur at twice the frequency of Black victims in absolute numbers. When adjusted for crime committal disproportionality, the disparity becomes even starker. He references a case from his book, a young white man who died under nearly identical circumstances to George Floyd while experiencing a mental health crisis. Officers knelt on him. They mocked him. There were no protests. The accountability was partial. The public memory is non-existent.
I wrote about this young man in my book because George Floyd and I forget his name now. It's Tillman or I forget. It's not Tillman. It started with a T. But he died. It's going to come to me in a second. But he died almost identical to George Floyd. It was even worse than George Floyd, to be quite honest, because George Floyd was in a interaction with them. He was doing this. The other guy was having a medical emergency because he was losing his mind, and he had called police to help him. And they get there and they kneel on him. He dies. They mock him. They laugh at him. Oh, look, he's snoring right now. Oh, he's gonna go home to mommy. He was dead. And you didn't get any press. And the cops were held accountable to a certain degree, but there's no activism in that. I remember.
The difference, he argues, is marketability. Bad policing with a racial component is treated as incompetence. Bad policing with a racial component is treated as evil. Both are wrong. Both destroy lives. But the advocacy industry concentrates on one category because that is where the lever of public attention delivers the highest return. The evidence was never asked.
Bad policing is accepted in a way. Misfeasance or malfeasance, could be either one. They did the job bad or they did the job bad on purpose. That is much more acceptable when it does not have a racial aspect in America. I'm just saying, as a 30-year journalist, like if you're a bad cop, you're not good at your job. That is much more understandable than you did this on purpose because it was Black. And George Floyd was a really interesting one for me because the mistake that was made, it was pretty obvious. He had a lot of cell phone video. I don't know what Chauvin was thinking. I don't know if it's because he knew that guy and didn't like him, but I don't know what he was doing. When you got multiple other cops saying to you, this is bad, what's happening, you'd think you'd listen. But the mistake was making George Floyd a saint and trying to pretend that, this guy should have a statue to him. No.
The George Floyd case is examined as a turning point. The officer's conduct was indefensible, recorded on multiple devices, flagged by fellow officers on scene. That footage should have been enough. But the aftermath, Brew notes, attempted to sanctify a flawed individual rather than focus solely on the systemic failure. The mistake was making the man a symbol instead of letting the act speak for itself. That distortion, he argues, repeats itself in cases like Nolan Wells, where the machinery of advocacy locks into a narrative before the forensics are complete.
Oh, the situation should be remembered and learned from, but he is not a guy to sanctify, So that was a very tricky bit of business to walk through, and it became a catalyst for all kinds of shit, as you'll remember. But this keeps happening, whether it's what's happening with ICE, white, brown, and what we just saw in Wisconsin. That shooting bothers me too. This body cams thing, I'd love your take on it as a guy who's a police officer. If I were a police officer, I would definitely want the body camera because I know people are going to make shit up about me. And I want you to see, here's where it was. I trust.
What happens when the advocacy machinery outruns the evidence? Witnesses go silent. Alternative suspects remain unexamined. A case that might have been a tragic drowning or an interpersonal dispute becomes permanently encased in a framework that cannot be corrected without political cost. That is not justice. That is narrative lock-in. The body washed up near Horn Island because the current dictated it. The phone sat on a boat because the water dictated it. The investigation now must dictate the rest, if it is allowed to.
Trust myself to do the job the right way. I want you to see that. And most often, body cameras support officers' reckoning of events over complaints. Hey, thank you for watching. I post clips like this every day, so you can just...
The publicly available document to consult is the Horn Island drowning incident report filed with the Jackson County Sheriff's Office. Read it. Then ask yourself, does the physical evidence recovered match the timeline presented in the media, or does it match the one Tony Brew just laid out? Leave your answer in the comments. Subscribe for more.